My parents tried to secretly marry off my brother because his girlfriend got pregnant at 19. I don't even know where to start. My hands are shaking so hard I can barely type this, but I need to get it out. I need an outside perspective before I completely lose my mind. I feel like I just detonated a bomb in the middle of my own life, and I'm standing in the crater wondering if I did the right thing or just destroyed everything I've ever known. I live in Gethsemane, a neighborhood in Cartagena. If you've ever seen pictures of Colombia, it's probably the place you're imagining. The walls of the houses are painted in these impossibly bright colors: mango yellow, bougainvillea pink, Caribbean blue. Music is always spilling out of open doorways, and the air is thick with the smell of arepas and the sea. It's beautiful, but it's also a fishbowl. Every family's business is community property. Gossip here travels faster than the afternoon breeze, and reputation isn't just important, it's currency. It's everything. At the center of this world are my parents, Ricardo and Marta. To everyone on our street, they are pillars of the community. My father, Ricardo, is all handshakes and booming, confident laughter at church functions. My mother, Marta, is the one who organizes neighborhood fundraisers, her smile always perfectly in place. They are respected. They are admired. But behind our closed doors, that public image is a god they worship, and my brother and I have always been the unwilling sacrifices. Their love for us is real, I know it is, but it's tangled up in this deep, suffocating terror of Cateran. What people will say. Their entire lives are a performance, and our roles were assigned at birth. Then there's my younger brother, Ivan. He's 19, just a kid, really. He's got this quiet kindness to him and a heart that's way too soft for the world my parents want him to conquer. For the past year, he's been dating Nayeli. She's 19 too, smart and driven, with a laugh that can fill a whole room. They're that sickeningly sweet kind of young couple, always holding hands, stealing glances, completely lost in their own little world. They were just starting out. For as long as I can remember, our family has operated under a tense, unspoken truce. My parents would lay down the law about our careers, our friends, our futures, and we would find small, quiet ways to push back without causing a full-blown war. It was a constant, exhausting dance of expectations and deflections. We smiled for the family photos, we obeyed on the big things, and we carved out tiny spaces of freedom in the shadows. It was our normal, a low-grade fever of anxiety that we all just learned to live with. But I guess a truce is just a pause in the fighting, and the war was always coming. I just never imagined I'd be the one to fire the first shot. That truce was built on a lifetime of them scripting our lives. For me, it was my career. I wanted to study photography, to capture the chaos and color of this city. My father sat me down, his face a mask of disappointment, and explained that photography was a hobby for a rich husband to fund, not a career for a daughter of his. They pushed me into a business administration degree. Every semester felt like I was holding my breath underwater. My relationships were no different. Every boyfriend I ever brought home was put through a silent, intense vetting process. My mother would ask them polite questions, but her eyes were like, scanners, searching for flaws, for anything that didn't fit the perfect picture. They weren't suggestions. They were directives disguised as parental concern, little corrections to keep my life path aligned with their grand design. But if the pressure on me was a constant, steady weight, for Ivan it was an iron cage. As the son, the Varan, he carried the burden of the family name. He was the one who was supposed to take over my father's small but respected import business. They've had access to his bank account since he opened it, to help him learn to manage it, they said. What it really meant was they could monitor every single purchase. They steered him away from his interest in music and into the same business program I'd endured. They treated him less like a young man and more like a high-stakes investment they had to manage perfectly. He was never trusted, only guided, and it hollowed him out. I'd watch him at family dinners, agreeing with our father with a vacant look in his eyes, his own thoughts and desires buried so deep, I wondered if he even remembered what they were. And from the moment Ivan brought Nayeli home, I could feel my parents' subtle, chilling disapproval. It was never a direct insult. It was always couched in concern, a poison dripped slowly over time. Nayeli's family is wonderful, but they're working class. Her father is a fisherman, her mother a seamstress. I'll never forget my mother's comment after their first meeting, said with a sigh as she cleared the dinner plates. "They seem like very simple people," she murmured, and the word simple was laced with 1,000 judgments. Then there were the comments about Nayeli's own ambitions. She's studying to be a medical technician, a difficult and admirable path, but to my mother, it wasn't prestigious enough. "It's good she has something to keep her busy," my mother once said to me in the kitchen, her voice low. "But a young woman should be focused on building a home, on supporting her partner's future." They didn't see her as a person with her own dreams. They saw her as a potential accessory for my brother, and in their eyes, she was the wrong brand. Every time they made a comment like that, a cold knot would form in my stomach. I'd see Ivan's hand tighten around Nayeli's under the table, his one small act of defiance. We all felt it, this slow-building storm. We just kept pretending we didn't see the clouds. The storm finally broke last Tuesday. I was in my room trying to tune out the sounds of the house with my headphones when the door creaked open. It was Ivan. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. His face was pale, almost gray, and slick with a cold sweat that had nothing to do with the Cartagena humidity. He just stood there in the doorway, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides, his chest rising and falling too fast. I pulled my headphones off. "Ivan? What is it? What's wrong?" He stumbled in and shut the door behind him, leaning his back against it, as if he was afraid someone would follow him. He couldn't meet my eyes. He just stared at a spot on the floor, his voice a choked whisper. "Nayeli," he started, then swallowed hard. "She's pregnant." The words hung in the air between us, heavy and terrifying. My own heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of dread for what was coming. But then I saw something else flicker in his eyes, under the sheer terror. It was a tiny spark of resolve, a fragile hint of wonder. He looked up at me for a second and said, "I'm going to be a father." And in that moment, he wasn't a scared kid. He was a man. That moment lasted for about 10 seconds. Before he could even take a full breath, before I could even say a single word of comfort, our parents descended. They must have been listening. They cornered him in the living room. There was no discussion. There was no, "How do you feel?" or "What do you both want to do?" My father stood over him, arms crossed, his face like stone. My mother paced back and forth, wringing her hands. It wasn't a family conversation. It was an interrogation. Then my father delivered the verdict. "We have handled it," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "You will do the right thing and marry the girl. You have an appointment at the civil registry on Friday morning at 10 a.m. This is what a man does. You will not bring shame upon this family." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command, delivered with the cold finality of a judge's sentence. They informed him of his own wedding date like they were telling him his dentist appointment had been rescheduled. I was reeling, my mind a chaotic mess of fear for my brother and disgust at my parents. But what happened next is what turned my blood to ice. I was standing in the hallway, completely paralyzed, when I heard my mother's voice from the kitchen. It was low and secretive, the voice she uses for gossip she doesn't want the neighbors to overhear. She was on the phone. "Tia? Yes, it's all arranged," she cooed, a sickeningly sweet tone dripping from every word. No, nothing big. We're keeping it small, for obvious reasons. Just a quick civil ceremony. Ricardo is getting the rings. We just need you to be the witness." I felt a wave of nausea. This was a cover-up, a PR strategy, not a celebration of life. And then she said the words that lit a fire in my soul. There was a pause, and then she sighed dramatically. "It's the only way," she whispered into the phone. "We have to do this to save Nayeli from a life of sin, to give the child a legitimate name." That was it, the breaking point. It was never about Ivan being a man. It was never about supporting Nayeli or protecting their baby. It was about her reputation, her twisted sense of piety, her need to present a flawless, holy image to the world, even if it meant trapping two teenagers in a loveless, coerced marriage. In her story, Nayeli wasn't a scared young woman about to become a mother. She was a sinner who needed saving, and my mother was the saint swooping in to wash her clean with a forced wedding certificate. Standing there, frozen on the cool tile, I felt the fear drain out of me, and something else, something hard and cold and furious, took its place. They weren't saving anyone. They were building a cage, and I knew in that instant that I was going to tear it apart. My feet felt glued to the floor for a second, my whole body buzzing with a white-hot rage that was almost perfectly silent, and still. The sound of my mother hanging up the phone broke the spell. Adrenaline, sharp and clean, shot through my veins. My first thought wasn't even about Yvonne. It was about Nayeli. She was being talked about like a problem to be solved, a stain to be scrubbed out. She deserved to know what was happening. She deserved a choice. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone as I found her mother's number. The phone rang once, twice, and my heart hammered against my ribs with each tone. She answered with a warm, "Hola, mija, how are you?" And the sound of her normal, kind voice almost broke me. I took a breath, trying to keep my own voice from trembling. "Señora?" I started, and she must have heard the panic because her tone shifted instantly. "What is it? Is Nayeli okay?" "She's fine," I rushed to say, "but my parents, they're not." And then it all came tumbling out of me in a frantic, hushed whisper. I told her about the pregnancy, about my parents cornering Yvonne, about, the forced appointment at the registry on Friday. I told her every single word I'd overheard my mother say on the phone, the part about the secret witnesses, the rings, and the final, soul-crushing line about saving Nayeli from sin. There was dead silence on the other end of the line. For a horrifying moment, I thought she didn't believe me, or worse, that she agreed with them. But then I heard her take a sharp, ragged breath. When she spoke again, her voice was low and tight, all the warmth gone, replaced by a steel I had never heard before. "Those arrogant, hypocritical... They will not do this to my daughter," she hissed. "They will not turn my daughter into a pawn for their reputation." In that instant, we weren't just my brother's girlfriend's mom and me. We were allies. We were a united front. We made a plan to meet the next day, and when I hung up, the rage in my chest had a new name: purpose. I knew a simple, emotional argument wouldn't work with my parents. That was our entire childhood. Pleading with them was like pleading with a hurricane. You just get swept away. I needed proof. I needed ammunition. I went to Ivan's room and found him sitting on the edge of his bed, just staring at the wall, looking completely hollowed out. He looked like a prisoner who had already accepted his sentence. I sat next to him and put a hand on his back. "We're going to fight this," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. He just shook his head slowly. "How?" "Dad already said..." "I don't care what he said," I cut him off. "Ivan, look at me. Do you want to marry Nayeli on Friday?" His eyes filled with tears, and he finally broke, burying his face in his hands. "No," he sobbed. "I mean, yes, someday, but not like this. Not because they're forcing us." That was all I needed to hear. "Okay," I said. "Then I need your phone. I need you to trust me." He didn't even hesitate. He just pulled it out of his pocket and handed it over. For the next hour, I sat on his floor, screenshotting every single text message my parents had sent him since he told them the news. The sheer volume of emotional blackmail was sickening. From my father: "Your irresponsibility has put this family in a difficult position. The only honorable solution is marriage. Do not make it worse by being a coward." From my mother: "Nayeli is a good girl from a simple family. They can't protect her from the shame of this. It is our duty, and your duty, to give that baby a proper name. Don't break my heart by refusing." And the worst one, from my father, sent just an hour before: "The appointment is made. I expect you to be there. This is not a discussion. I saved every single one. Each screenshot felt like loading a bullet into a magazine. But I wasn't done. I shifted from pure emotion to cold strategy. I spent the next few hours deep in a Google rabbit hole, my laptop glowing in the dark of my room. I searched for forced marriage Colombia, consent for civil marriage, legal rights of adults. I found it. Article 140 of the Colombian Civil Code. It listed the reasons a marriage contract could be nullified. Reason number 3 jumped off the page. Por fuerza o miedo, due to force or fear. I read it over and over. A marriage is invalid if consent is obtained through force or through a fear so great that it renders the person incapable of making a free choice. I printed the entire article directly from the government's official website. I found a pamphlet from a women's rights organization detailing the legal definition of coercion. I printed that too. The quiet whir of my old printer was the only sound in the house, a secret machine forging my weapons for the war to come. I wasn't just going to stop them anymore. I was going to prove that their honorable solution was not just cruel, it was illegal. The quiet confidence I'd felt while printing out my evidence evaporated the next morning. My father must have seen the folder on my desk, or maybe he just sensed the shift in the air, the way the silence in our house had gone from tense to hostile. He didn't come for me. He went for Ivan. I heard his voice from the living room, a low rumble that was more terrifying than any shout. I crept to the doorway and watched. My father had my brother backed against the wall, his finger jabbing at Ivan's chest. "I hear you've been talking to your sister," he said, his voice dripping with menace. "Let me be perfectly clear. If you do not show up on Friday, if you embarrass me and your mother like this, you are done. Your bank account, which I co-signed for, will be frozen. The doors to this house will be locked. You will be on the street with nothing. Do you understand me?" Ivan was shaking, his eyes wide with terror, and he just nodded, a tiny, jerky movement. But my father wasn't finished. He held out his hand. "Give it to me," he commanded. "Your cedula." Ivan looked confused. "Why?" My father's eyes narrowed. "So I know where you are. You will get, your national ID back at the civil registry on Friday morning when you have done your duty. Until then, I'm holding on to it." My blood ran cold. He was literally taking my brother's identity hostage. Without his cedula, Ivan couldn't get a job, couldn't travel, couldn't even legally buy a beer. He was a non-person. My father snatched the card from Ivan's trembling hand and walked away, leaving my brother slumped against the wall, utterly defeated. The morning of the wedding felt surreal. Nayeli and her mother met me at the corner, their faces pale but determined. We walked to the civil registry early, the oppressive Cartagena heat already settling over the city. The waiting room was sterile and cold, a jarring contrast to the vibrant streets outside. My folder of evidence felt like a lead weight in my hands. I scanned the clerks behind the long counter until my eyes landed on a woman who looked like she had kind eyes. I walked up to her desk, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "Excuse me," I whispered, leaning in. "I need your help. My parents are trying to force my brother into a marriage today. He doesn't consent." The woman looked up from her computer, her expression shifting from boredom to concern. She typed their names into her system, her brow furrowed. I watched her eyes scan the screen, and then they widened almost imperceptibly. She leaned forward, her voice dropping even lower. "Your parents were here yesterday," she said quietly. "They filed an affidavit claiming your brother's ID was lost. They requested the ceremony be processed under urgent circumstances to bypass the standard waiting period." A wave of nausea washed over me. This wasn't just a misguided attempt to save face. This was premeditated fraud. They had a backup plan. They were prepared to marry him off with or without his cooperation, with or without his legal identity. The clerk looked me dead in the eye. "Thank you for coming to me," she said. "This is very serious." Just then, my parents, Ricardo and Marta, swept into the waiting room. They looked impatient, my mother smoothing down her dress, my father checking his watch. They saw us, me, Nayeli, and her mother, standing by the counter, and their faces froze. The air crackled with a sudden, suffocating silence. This was it. I took a deep breath, walked towards the center of the room, and turned to face them. I made sure my voice was loud enough for everyone in that quiet, sterile office to hear. "This ceremony will not be happening," I announced, my voice shaking only slightly. "There is no free consent here. There is only coercion and fraud." My mother gasped, her hand flying to her chest. My father's face turned a deep, furious red. Before he could speak, I walked back to the clerk and placed my folder on her counter. "Here," I said, my voice ringing with a conviction I didn't know I had. "Here is the evidence, the text messages, the threats, and the law they are breaking." The clerk took the folder without a word, her expression grim. She typed for a moment, then looked up at my parents. "The file has been canceled," she said flatly, "and I am putting a formal flag on your names for attempting to file a fraudulent document." The dam broke. We all ended up in the lobby, and my father exploded. "How dare you!" he roared, his voice echoing off the marble floors. "You air our family's laundry in public. You disrespect your mother and me. This is about honor. This is about our name." He was spitting with rage, pointing his finger at me, at Yvonne, who had just arrived and was standing frozen by the door. He was losing control, and a part of him seemed to be enjoying the spectacle. But then, the clerk calmly walked out from behind the counter. She stood there, a small woman in a government uniform, and looked my father right in the eye. "Senor," she said, her voice perfectly level, "attempting to force someone into a marriage is a serious offense in Colombia. I would be more than happy to call the police and have them come down to help you sort out your family's honor." The change was instantaneous. The rage drained from my father's face, replaced by a look of pure, horrified shock. He went utterly, completely silent. The fight was over. He had been defeated, not by my anger, but by a quiet, bureaucratic reminder that his power ended where the law began. We walked out of the civil registry and into the blinding Cartagena sun. The noise of the street, the distant salsa music, the roar of a moto taxi, the vendors calling out, rushed in to fill the silence my father had left behind. For a few blocks, nobody spoke. The three of us, Nayeli, her mother, and I, were a tight little unit, while Yvonne trailed a few feet behind, lost in his own world. The adrenaline was starting to wear off, leaving a shaky, hollow feeling in my stomach. We were about to turn onto the street that led to her family's house when Nayeli stopped. She just stood there on the cracked sidewalk, forcing us all to a halt. She turned to Ivan, and her eyes were clear, not with anger, but with a kind of sad, fierce clarity. "Yvonne," she said, her voice quiet, but so firm it cut through the street noise. "I love you, and I love our baby. But I'm not going to marry you." Yvonne flinched, like he was expecting another blow. "Nayeli, No, listen," she said, taking a step closer to him. "Not like this. Not because our parents are fighting or because we're scared. I want to finish my program. I want us to be ready for this baby because we want to be, not because we're being shamed into it. If we get married someday, it has to be our choice." I watched my brother's face. For a second, I saw the ghost of our father's teachings flicker there. The panic, the fear of not doing the honorable thing. But then, it was gone. A slow wave of relief washed over his features, so profound it was like he was breathing for the first time all week. He reached out and took her hand, his fingers lacing through hers. "You're right," he whispered, and his voice was steadier than I'd heard it in years. "Okay. It'll be our choice." Watching them, it finally hit me. We hadn't just stopped a ceremony. We had kicked down the door to a future they could actually build for themselves, brick by brick, on their own terms. In that moment, I felt so completely, unshakably justified. A wedding without choice is just a prettier cage. That's all it would have been. A life sentence of resentment, signed and notarized. They would have been performing a marriage for the rest of their lives, just like our parents do, smiling for the neighbors while the foundation of their life rotted away from the inside. I know logically that I saved them from that, I protected them. I did the right thing. But now it's late. The house is silent. The righteous fire I felt earlier has burned down to cold, bitter ash, and all I can see when I close my eyes is the look on my parents' faces. I see the exact moment my mother understood what I was doing. Her perfect poised mask didn't just crack, it shattered. Her face crumpled with a look of such profound shock and betrayal that it felt like I had physically slapped her. And my father. I've seen him angry my whole life, but I've never seen him look so small. When the clerk threatened to call the police, all the power, all the booming authority just evaporated. He was just a humiliated old man standing in a government lobby. I didn't just disagree with them. I ambushed them. I used the law, their own obsession with appearances, as a weapon and publicly executed their reputation. The news of this will sweep through Gethsemane like wildfire. I can already hear the phone calls, the hushed conversations over coffee, the perfect family, the pillars of the community, exposed. Their son held hostage, their daughter turning on them with legal documents. I've handed the neighborhood gossips a feast that will last them for, months. I've fractured our family, maybe beyond repair. I keep asking myself if there was another way, a less destructive path. But then I remember the confiscated ID and the fraudulent filing, and I know a quiet conversation wouldn't have worked. They had contingency plans for our descent? So did I have to burn it all down to save my brother? Did I have to destroy my family to let him start his own? I feel like I saved 2 people by sacrificing 2 others, and I'm choking on the weight of the wreckage. It's been a few days now, and the silence from my parents is a living thing in our house. It's heavier than the humid air, thicker than the walls. They don't speak to me. They don't even look at me. If I walk into a room, they walk out. I'm a ghost in my own home, haunting the people who are supposed to love me most. The only communication I've had is secondhand, through the barrage of texts and calls from my aunts and cousins. My mother's sisters have been relentless, calling me a disgrace, telling me I have no idea the damage I've done. My tia Elena, my mom's favorite, sent me a message that just said, "Your parents gave you everything, and you repaid them with public humiliation. You should be ashamed." To them, and I guess to everyone they've spoken to, I am the villain. I'm the ungrateful daughter who aired our family's dirty laundry for the whole neighborhood to see, who took a private matter and turned it into a public spectacle, all to disrespect her elders. They aren't the ones who tried to illegally force their son into a marriage. They're the victims of my betrayal. Yvonne and Nayeli are staying with her family. Their little house is crowded and noisy and filled with a warmth our home hasn't had in years. I went to see them yesterday. They were sitting at the kitchen table, heads bent together over a blurry ultrasound photo, Nayeli tracing the tiny shape with her finger. They looked like a team. They're figuring out prenatal appointments, talking about names, planning for their baby on their own terms. They are free. Yvonne hugged me so tightly when I was leaving and whispered, "Thank you. You saved us." And I know he means it. But I can see the shadow behind his eyes. He's grieving. He won his freedom but lost his parents in the same battle, and the guilt he feels over that loss is something I put there. I see him check his phone, hoping for a message that will never come, and I feel a fresh wave of sickness in my stomach. I gave him a future, but I might have stolen his past. So here I am. Our family is completely split. The gossip is flying through Gethsemane, and every version of the story paints me as a monster. My parents are barricaded in their victimhood, refusing to acknowledge any wrongdoing. And I'm stuck in this impossible middle ground, feeling both completely justified in what I did and physically ill with guilt over how I did it. I look at my brother and Nayeli, and I know I made the right choice for them. But then I think of my mother's shattered face and my father's public humiliation, and I wonder if I'm the cruel one after all. I blew up my entire world to stop one injustice, and now I'm standing in the rubble, completely alone. So, Reddit, I need to ask, Ida for publicly humiliating my parents and blowing up my family to stop them from forcing my 19-year-old brother into a marriage he didn't want?